awesome place to meet and be. But speaking of weddings, and we wish you all the best this weekend. No, you don't need any picture. 27 years ago, 2 months from now, 27 years ago, I was married here at Farmington. I was the youngest of all my friends entering into marriage. I have a wonderful wife, very happily married, but 27 years ago, I was the most nervous human on the planet, and I was in this room right here, right before the big wedding that was down in the reception hall. And so I was sitting extremely nervous. I can't come anywhere near Farmington without getting nervous still. And so Greg says, "Oh, we're going to be in the blue room." I was like, "Oh, great." And there is a photo of me that nobody's ever looked like, more white and pale. All the blood was sucked away. But anyway, I'm going to try to overcome some fear today in this room. I'm going to go kind of fast with this talk. I'm going to keep an eye on the clock. Greg has told me to be very punctual here. And the title of this little brief talk is called, "Are You Satisfied?" And it's just a message that the Lord kind of downloaded to me. Are you satisfied? And it's a question to ask, are you satisfied with your marriage? Are you satisfied with your life? Are you satisfied with your job? Are you satisfied with how your family life is going? Are you satisfied? Now, if you look at this handout, the very first thing that I've written here happens to be, all things, lyrics from Mick Jagger. Any Rolling Stones fans here in the group? We got a few that will admit to it.
I said he wanted to sing it for us.
Who's going to sing it?
No, I guess it's a short bunch.
The reason I have this first set of lyrics in here to the song Satisfaction by Mick Jagger is it actually was an anthem of mine in the 80s and 90s. I can't get no satisfaction, but I try and I try. We've all probably, at some time or another, found ourselves at least humming along to that or singing along to that in the car. I know that I have, and I've seen the Stones several times in concert, including right here at Scott Stadium. And so it was just incredible to just the way God put this together is to point out in my previous life, before I came to know the Lord, that I was singing this song, I can't get no satisfaction, and I try, and I'm just singing along because that's what the words of the song, that's what they say. But they were actually applied to my life 10 years ago and earlier, until I came to know the Lord. And what I have laid out next to this is the version of John chapter 10, verse 10, which a lot of you in this room know that verse. But when you read it in the New Living Translation, Jesus says these words, that these purpose is to steal, kill, and destroy. My purpose is to give them a rich and satisfying life. A rich and satisfying life. And when I kind of put these two, put the words of Jesus next to the words of Mick Jagger, I was like, oh my goodness, for me, that just perfectly tells the story of my life. That was then, and this is now. But I have to tell you, many of you in this room have seen it, I came to know the Lord the hard way. And I'm not going to repeat all of the gory details, but those of you that don't know my story, I want you to look at this. This is kind of what happened to me, and I'm going to kind of tell it in a parable, so you can kind of feel the pain along with me. Anybody been to Georgetown here in this group? Anybody know, have you ever walked by the stairs where they filmed The Exorcist. You know what I'm talking about? You know what I'm talking about? You know those stairs. Can you describe those stairs for me? Just what
They are very steep,
very steep.
and they go forever. They go right down to, just as you come across the Key Bridge,
Yes.
you look across and there are these stairs that go, I mean, straight up.
Oh my goodness. Okay, so picture, if you don't know those stairs in your mind, picture the steepest stairs you've ever seen. I grew up in Bethesda. We went down to Georgetown all the time. That was right off of M Street. So we know exactly. It was near Georgetown University. So how I came to know the Lord, I need you to picture this. Picture, if you can, this is the only real way for me to describe it. Picture as if somebody put me in a grocery cart. A grocery cart you would see at Giant. Put me in a grocery cart, and I'm at the top of the stairs. And I'm living this life at the very top of the stairs. And I think I'm happy, but it's kind of that Mick Jagger version of happy. I think I'm happy. I think everything's going great. I should be happy. And just during the real estate crash of 2009, picture me in that shopping cart and somebody just pushing Jeff down the stairs. Not just me going down the stairs, but me in a shopping cart where I have no control over this, and I'm flipping over. Are you guys seeing this at all? Is everybody seeing this? You're flipping over, and those in this room who actually witnessed that, there are a few in this room that witnessed me go in the shopping cart down the steep stairs. It was something where you would just, if you had seen that, you'd go, ooh, that looks rough. It's almost like it's an Evel Knievel stunt gone bad. Ba-boom, ba-boom, ba-boom. And when I see and I look back now so many years later, there's so much symbolism in that kind of falling down the stairs, and you get down to the bottom and splat. And I thought, at the bottom, all the way at the bottom, I thought it was over. I thought that was the end. And it was very dark at the bottom. I didn't, disoriented, dark, all alone. And what I found, and I'm going to speak on here, is that there was a death that occurred. There was a death that occurred at the bottom of those stairs. A death occurred. My old self is gone. It occurred down at the bottom. And Jesus came in and met me at a time when I was all the way at the bottom of those stairs, broken into little bitty pieces, all alone. And I found what the prophet Jeremiah writes about in the book of Lamentations. I found that to be true when he says, the faithful love of the Lord never ends. His mercy never ceases. Until you encounter that for yourself, and unfortunately for me, I wouldn't want you to go down those stairs. I wouldn't want you to do it. But if that's what it took for me to get that encounter, and basically what happened there was a resurrection that happened. It was, I grew up in the age of $6 million man, Steve Austin. They can rebuild him. Well, God met me down there in little bitty broken pieces. It was ugly and nasty and all alone. And there's a couple verses that I will ask you to visit. If this resonates with you at all, if you've ever found yourself in that broken spot that I speak of, there's this verse in the book of Revelation, chapter 3, verse 20. And Jesus says, Here I am. I stand at the door and knock. Whoever hears my voice and opens the door, I will eat with him and he will eat with me. There's this encounter waiting to happen. Unfortunately for me, when I was living the life at the top of the stairs, I had what C.S. Lewis talks about as a terrible case of a wrong sense of order. Like C.S. Lewis, in his wonderful book, The Screwtape Letters, if you have not read that, I read it a long time ago, and then my boys had to read it in school, and we read it together. Screwtape Letters, nutshell, you have a very hierarchically superior devil who's teaching his protege, a little demon, how to eat high for lunch, how to get you over to his side and away from God. And one of the things that he's teaching his pupil, Wormwood is teaching his pupil, is get them to have the wrong sense of order in their life. In other words, Jeff Gaffney at the top of the stairs, get them to kind of worship their career. Get them to worship what they have in the garage. Yes, it was nice having a couple of Suburbans in the garage and a big full bank account and a nice big house. Get them to worship that lifestyle. Get them to put that in front of God. Get them to have a wrong sense of order in their life. And I had a wrong sense of order, and it took kind of crashing all the way down those stairs till there was nothing left of me. And God to put me back together and say, you know, as ugly as this is, God can work for the good of all who love him and are called according to his purpose. The great promise of Romans chapter 8. As terrible as this flipping upside down and crashing down to the bottom of the stairs, as terrible as it is, something great's going to come out of this. This is what the Lord said to me. He said, Jeff, if you allow me into your life and basically hand me the keys and let me take over in your life, we can trade these ashes here and make something beautiful out of it. And so that was the message, and it was a long, hard crash. And what the Lord told me, because I had this long, hard crash all the way down to the bottom, he said, once we kind of dust you up and remake you and give you a new life and put a new song in your mouth and you're going to write the word on your heart, you're going to get up and tell other people about that experience, because there's a lot of people in this world that we find that are going through tough and hard times. So we share this with people in hopes that we can encourage somebody when they find themselves at the bottom of the stairs, that if you bring God into that, he can trade those ashes for beauty. What I'm going to hit on here, I'm going way too long on that intro, is what I call 7 pillars of how God rebuilt my spiritual house. 7 pillars, and I'm going to touch on each one, and then at the end I'm going to be quiet and see if anybody wants to talk about anything. And at the very bottom, if you don't have any questions for the group, at the very bottom, if you use a magnifying glass, you can see my email address or my phone number. I'm not kidding you. I welcome an email or a phone call or a text, and you say, hey, tell me about that spill down at the bottom of the stairs again. I'm happy to share it with you. It's just kind of what the Lord has told me to do. I shared with you number 1 of the 7 pillars. It begins and ends with Jesus. You must encounter him. If you find yourself today like I was 10 years ago, with a hole in my heart, trying to fill it with everything except for Jesus, if you find yourself that you are not satisfied today with your life, you're not satisfied with your marriage, your job, whatever the case is, if you're not satisfied, bring your hurt and your fears. Bring it to God. Invite Jesus into that situation. You will have an encounter with Him. It will change your life forever. I found a scripture this morning that the Lord gave to me. It's Psalm 34:18, and it comes from the Message version. It says, if your heart is broken, you'll find God right there. If you're kicked in the gut, He'll help you catch your breath. I found that scripture, Psalm 34:18, to be absolutely true. If your heart is broken, you'll find God right there. So the first pillar, I'm just saying, if you haven't had an encounter with Jesus, Prophet Jeremiah says, you will find me when you seek me with all your heart. It's available for you and will change your life forever. Number 2, second pillar, be transformed. What's that mean? 10 years ago, I had no idea what that meant. My life changed forever when I found Rob Archer walking around with a little journal in his hand at the old Arches. We used to meet there. The Thursday morning group used to meet at Arches Frozen Yogurt. And I saw my brother Rob, Rabbi Rob, walking around with a little journal. And I actually made fun of him. I was like, sissy boy, what's with the journal, sissy boy? He showed me his journal. And he shared with me in his journal, there was a Bible reading plan. I was one of those guys who had tried to read the Bible before. I started at Genesis and I never got past, chapter 15 or 16. It just wasn't sticky to me. It was just nothing happened, bouncing off. But Rob showed me in his journal this Bible reading plan where somebody has gone through and paired up a New Testament chapter with 1 or 2 chapters in the Old Testament. You read it every day, about 30 minutes, and you'll cycle your way through the entire Bible in a year. That was 5 or 6 years ago. And I was like, wow, people really do that? Yeah. And then I was like, well, what's with the journal part? And he said, well, when God speaks to me, I just start writing it down in my journal. So I have been journaling since Brother Rob showed that to me. And I encourage you to that because this thing about being transformed, when you kind of cycle through the Bible a little bit, and you get some friends that start pointing things out to you, it was actually, it was Tony Bennett who walked me through Romans chapter 12. And I was like, well, what's in there? What's in there? He's like, oh my goodness. He spent the summer in Romans chapter 12. But verse 2 says, do not be conformed to the patterns of this world, but be transformed by the renewing of your mind. And I was like, what's that mean? It's like, when you read God's Word every day, there is a washing of your mind that occurs, and your mind just gets completely transformed, and the thoughts that you think throughout the day are, when I look back to the I can't get no satisfaction guy 10 years ago, and I think about those thoughts, and let me tell you, just in full disclosure, I'm still at work, okay? There's still stuff that God is saying, I don't really like how you're doing that, and we got improvement to do here, and so there's still stuff going on that God is working out. But I'm digging into the Word, and I was taught by a very good friend to just read until he talks to you. Just read until he talks to you. And make that part of your day. So as I build my new spiritual house, it's number 1, I'm trying to encounter Jesus. And number 2 is I'm trying to be transformed by the renewing of my mind. Number 3 was the biggest issue for me. Fear and doubt. And it's amazing how the enemy still preys on my mind with fear and doubt. What are you talking about? Let me give you an example. Greg said, Jeff, would you speak to the men's group on First Friday? I said, no, yes, no, no, yes, no, no, no. Maybe next month. Maybe the following month. Sign me up for June, July. I might be ready by then. And then Greg has been such a good friend. He looked at me and was like, will you speak? Yes, 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 I will. Yes, yes. And then I kept saying, Philippians 4:13, I can do all things through Christ who strengthens me. Help me, Lord, because the enemy comes after me with fear and doubt. Just last night, the enemy said, it'd be an empty room. You have empty mind. You have scrambled eggs for brains. You won't be able to remember what you're talking about. Just an hour ago, too much information. Let's just say they have a wonderful restaurant here at Farmington. Banish the fear and doubt. You guys know the scripture. You know the story of Joshua. You know how Moses led them out of captivity. And you know they wandered 40 years. And you know Moses dies. And now it's Joshua's turn. And he's new to the job. And he's got 3 million countrymen that he's got to take across the Jordan River. And it's his moment. And what's the message that God says to him? This comes from TLB is the Living Bible. TLB, Michael? The Living Bible translation says, banish fear and doubt. You guys know it. Be strong and courageous. In the first chapter of Joshua, God says to him 3 times, be strong and courageous. It's just sticky to me when I hear banish fear and doubt, because I'm like, okay, that's the hand that the enemy plays to me every time. Banish the fear and doubt. I just decided I am not going to live my life in fear anymore. I traveled all the way down to the bottom of those stairs to find out that Jesus is real. He put a new song in my heart. He's told me that I am to go out and talk to men about my experience and how God changed my life. And the last thing I'm going to do is be captive to fear and doubt. I hope that what I say today resonates with somebody in this room. But my number one job is to be obedient. God said, tell your story. I'm going to tell my story. And I hope it sticks with somebody. But the bottom line is that God rescued me. Man, I was cooked. And He rescued me. And He gave me a new chance. And He gave me a new life. Sorry if I get Number 4. Put God in charge of your work. So again, this is how I'm building my spiritual house. I have 7 pillars. The Message version of Proverbs 16:3 says, put God in charge of your work, then what you've planned will take place. Put God in charge of your work. Jeff, it's like I'm speaking to myself. Jeff, put God in charge of your work. And once you do that, it takes all the pressure off. But God, at the same time, because I do real estate as a day job, and I have to make a living, God has given me this vision that here in Charlottesville, here in this city, we can be the launching pad for a spiritual revival in businesses. We can be the model, and that God can use this as a launching pad for something that God has given me this vision, and He just burned it on my heart that businessmen in Charlottesville, Virginia would stand up collectively and say, I'm putting God in charge of my business. And that message and that model that we do here would spread across the nation. Boosh! Because a group of men got together at Farmington and had lunch and honored God and shared their testimony. And then when this guy was done, the next guy got up and talked about how God touched them and saved them during a tough time in their life, that we would share our testimony. That we would put God in charge of our work. Just a few more. Number 5, be a foot washer. What's that mean? You guys know the story at the Last Supper. It confused the disciples. Jesus stands up, puts on the towel, takes the shoes and socks off, sandals off for them, and starts washing their feet. The disciples are confused. What are you doing? You're the king. You're the Messiah. You're washing my feet. And Jesus says, I'm modeling this out for you. He basically was modeling out humility and servanthood. He was modeling that out for us. How does that apply to me in my business? Let me tell you how it applies to me in my business. I have decided that really what I am is a full-time foot washer at work. I know Michael Guthrie can completely relate to this. Okay? So what I have decided is that every agent that comes into my office, and they all come in, and not all of them, but usually when they come in, it's not because they're sharing good news. Somebody's mad about something. We get a lot of angry agents. A lot of them. And you know what? It's hard to sit there and listen to their complaints. And I have just determined that I am where I am to be a professional, full-time foot washer. And as awful and horrible as that seems, as angry as they are when they come into my office, I'm washing their feet. I'm going to sit there and I'm going to listen to them patiently, say everything they had to say. And I am going to wash their feet. And then the clients that I have, let me tell you, I go a long way with this, but I just was finished with a client who looked at no less than 62 homes, yanked a contract from this one, got close and put in a contract, yanked the contract. My kids, my 2 sons were home from college, and they saw me. You know, Dad gets up in the morning, comes home at night, working with my clients. My son Jay says to me, how'd it go, Dad? I said, Jay, I'm just washing feet today. He said, my clients, I'm here to serve them. And if it's in their best interest that they rent something, I'm going to help them rent. I'm going to be a full-time foot washer for my clients. Well, then let me ask you something. Here's what the Lord really said. I got to move on from this point. But the Lord really said, well, let me ask you something. How about those guys? Do you remember? Can you go back to the time when you fell down those stairs? And you remember the ones? You know the ones. The ones that laughed at you. The ones that stood up at the top of their own staircase and said, sucks for him. A couple of them maybe hawked a loogie down to me at the bottom. The ones that left when I needed them, the ones that betrayed and lied about me, you know, we all have them in our lives. I just happen to have a whole lot of them. And do you remember them? Can you wash their feet, Jeff? Can you actually wash their feet? Can you actually love the people that walked out on you? Can you do that? I will confess, that is a struggle. But again and again, this renewing of the mind, the Lord has told me that's what I'm to do. St. Augustine said, preach the gospel, and when necessary, use words. Come to an end here, Greg. I know you're looking at your watch. I got 2 more minutes forever. I talk about it all the time with my wife and my kids, and they're like, Dad, would you quit talking about the crazy man in Mark chapter 5, at the beginning of Mark chapter 5, Jesus and the disciples had just crossed over. He had just calmed the sea. They just crossed over. They come out. Here's this crazy man running around the tombstones, and he's filled with legions of demons. And you guys know the story. He has an encounter with Jesus. Sound familiar? He has an encounter with Jesus. Jesus rids him of all his demons. And the man became a new person after his encounter with Jesus. And I just see this so clearly. I see this story so clearly. The man comes, Jesus and his disciples are now back in the boat and they're getting ready to leave. And the man who just had legions of demons, Jeff Gaffney, top of the stairs, now gets put back together. This guy gets rid of all these demons. And he comes running up to Jesus and the disciples and he's like, move over, guys, I'm coming with you. Come on, I'm coming with you. We're going together. And I just see it. I just see this. I just see this story. And Jesus says, I'm not coming. But I have an assignment for you. Go back to your home and tell your family and your friends the incredible mercy that the Lord has had for you. Go back to your home and tell your family and friends the incredible mercy that the Lord has had for you. And I read that, and I remember sharing it with Peter Sorensen and coming up and saying, I think he's talking about me. I think that's what he's saying to me to do. He was like, oh, look at them. And my wife was like, if you would just stop talking about the crazy man in Mark chapter 5. And my kids are like, Dad, I don't get it. And I'm like, just trust me. Where I have built the sixth pillar of my spiritual house was go and tell. And now I'm up to number 7, and I promise I'm done. Number 7 is bring me your 2 fish. I'm going to be so quick on this story. You guys know the story. Jesus is preaching. The head count, they say it was 5,000 men followed him up this hillside. But if you dig kind of deeper in the history books, they say there was women and there was children. And so you do the math of what's called 15,000 women, children, 15,000 people there. And Jesus, you know the story. You guys know the story. One of the disciples said, how are we going to feed them? And Jesus is like, what do you got? The little boy has 2 loaves of bread and a fish. Jesus is like, bring them to me. Give me the fish and the 2 loaves. And you guys know it. Miracle of multiplicity occurs. And he gives thanks and breaks it. And he feeds, miraculously, feeds 15,000 people with 2 loaves and fish. What's that have to do with me? What's it have to do with you? I'm going to say this so fast because we're at the end. When Michael Guthrie came back to town, I'm so glad that you're here. That man has been such a good friend of mine. He's been one of those guys that as I fell down the stairs, he's been, eat anything down there?
I'm scared of heights.
I have a few other friends. Peter Sorensen and Greg, and there's others there. I mean, there's a group in here that encouraged me. But when Michael Guthrie came back to town, Michael is a very accomplished CEO with Roy Real Estate. And when he came back to town, one of the first moves that he made was he got a radio show on WINA. And I was happy for Michael. That didn't faze me at all until one of my agents comes running into my room and says, Michael Guthrie has a radio show. And I was like, yeah, good for Michael. Way to go, Michael. We need a radio show. What do you mean we need a radio show? That was translation. You need to do a radio show, Jeff. Okay, I'll do a radio show. Michael's on AM 1070. I'll do FM 1075. He can take AM, I'll take FM. But I stink on the radio. I don't want to do the radio. Michael's perfect for the radio. He's got a great personality. gonna have to do radio. I'm not any good at radio. And but what ends up happening, you guys know, if you do anything every week for 4 years, you end up getting halfway decent at something. I mean, that's, 52 times a year you're recording another radio show. And so over time you get half decent at it. And I sort of kind of found where my radio voice is. It's different than Michael's. I'm more of a kind of ask the question. That's kind of how I do it. And so, so what's the point? The point is this. One of the guys at the radio station, Joe Thomas, was diagnosed with cancer. And there's a wonderful receptionist there named Joyce, and Joyce and I would regularly pray for Joe Thomas and his cancer recovery. It was just something that, of course, when I said, yes, Joe wanted prayer, we prayed. That was that. Well, the next thing you know, where this led to was the radio station on the AM channel had all the religious broadcasting. It was all on the AM station, all on WINA, and the radio station that I was affiliated with on the FM station didn't have any religious broadcasting. And so the door opened for me, and a partnership was created where they asked if I would host a radio show on Sunday mornings about faith. Now, I'm looking at the clock, I know, I'm almost done. But I was brought up in a household, as much as I was recreated at the bottom of the stairs, I was brought up in a household where we didn't share our faith. We didn't. And it was kind of frowned upon. It's just, it was a vertical relationship. You and God, keep it to yourself. And so when this opportunity to do the radio show and talk about faith came, you want to talk about fear and doubt? I was eaten alive by fear and doubt on that. I was, no, I'm not going to do that. We didn't talk about faith. Well, and again, Greg and Peter have been terrific friends. They are like Barnabas. If you look up the name Barnabas in the Bible, it means sons of encouragement. They encouraged me and said, when a door opens like this, you have got to take the opportunity and just try it. So these two guys pushed me and said, if you've got that chance to do a radio show on faith. I said, I'll do it for a month. And this is how I end. I realized we've been doing the radio show now it's called Everyday Faith Radio. It's on Sunday mornings, 107.5 FM at 9:30. We interview people about their faith and how God has touched them in their lives. The very last story is that my mother heard about it through the grapevine that I was doing this radio show about faith. She started listening to it. She's 80 years old at Westminster, Canterbury. My father's 91 years old at Westminster, Canterbury. He's a World War II vet. World War II vets love the radio. And so I walked into Westminster, Canterbury, not long after starting this program, and one of the nurses grabbed me and said, Jeff, you're causing commotion up here at Westminster, Canterbury. I said, what do you mean? The lady said, what happens at 9:30 on Sunday mornings is your father has a radio about this big, attaches it to an extension cord, wheels out into the lobby, and all the wheelchairs on the third floor of Westminster, Canterbury congregate. And this is their little form of church, and we're bringing the word to them. And when that story was shared to me, I realized about the miracle of multiplicity. You just don't know when you share your story. And so I encourage you, I am finished officially in just one moment, but I would just encourage anybody here. This is the Gong Show ending. No, we are officially finished, but I wanted to say thank you for letting me get this out again, because I have this story that needs to be told. And numbers on here. You want to talk further? Call me, email me. Love you guys. Thank you.
Jeff, thank you very much. Thank you guys for coming. We don't have to leave right away. You can stay in the room if you want to talk with Jeff a little bit more. But one thing I just want to thank you for is your honesty and your courage to share your story. It's not easy to do that. It's not easy to do what Jeff just did. And what's easy to do is have a faith when everything's going well. Have a faith when you're on top. It's easy to quit when you're on the bottom. And I think Jeff has shown today that what God is interested in is the people who hold on to their faith when faced with the loss of all things. So, Jeff, thank you very much again for sharing.